Have you given any thought to contributing to the Melt? It's easy to do. Just click the Patreon link in the episode notes, and for as little as $3 a month, you can get access to bonus episodes, early access to regular episodes, and you can also participate in monthly Zoom meetups. It helps to keep the magic happening here at the Melt. So I encourage you to karmically entangle yourself with the Melt today by subscribing monthly for less than the price of a container of goatee wax, or a prosthetic pinky, or a half stick of DMT butter, or an inflatable casket, or the shrunken head of an Atlantean supermodel, or a woolly mammoth's merkin, or a crystalline replica of Baba Yaga's hut, or a capsule of Sasquatch dander.
This is Hunter Muse.
And this is Chris Snipes, and you are listening
to The Melt.
A couple of weeks ago, our friend Natalie Donna had Hunter and I on her podcast, Dystopian Deep Dives, as guests. She wanted to have us on to talk about our experiences with groups that could be defined as cults. Hunter had been involved in the Carlos Castaneda subculture, and I had been involved in the Temple of Psychic Youth. What follows is the result of that conversation.
I think about cults and groupthink and that kind of stuff all the time. And I find that a lot of cults center around sort of a fantastic narrative, which I think was probably the case for the groups that both of you were a part of at one time. Was that part of the draw for you?
You want to go first?
Well, in my situation, I came a little bit late to the party. The Carlos Castaneda world had been kind of in its apex and in its heyday in the 60s, in the late 60s and early 70s. And I arrived into their ecosystem I first read the books in the 80s, in like 84 was kind of my introduction into that world. And then subsequently met Castaneda and his group in the 90s, in the early 90s. So in my specific circumstance, I think that there was a lot of mythos surrounding Castaneda, and many people set out, and this is kind of a common thread that I've heard from a lot of people who did end up kind of being in his stratosphere, was that they decided to find him many years before they'd ever actually had any interaction with him. So it wasn't like there was a epicenter that you could go to. It's not like becoming a Mormon where you can go to a church and this is the place where you're going to find the gospel. This was way more fantastical in some senses because it required a lot of your own investigation and your own intent and your own ability. So for the millions of people who had read these books, there was a very small segment of people who actually set out to find him and say, this is someone that I want to have some kind of a interaction with. So I think while I agree with you, there are some fantastical circumstances surrounding cults. There's very few cults that were like the Castaneda group in that there wasn't one place you could go where you knew you were going to find Castaneda or anyone in his group.
And they probably weren't necessarily referring to themselves as a cult, right?
Right.
No, that was the hilarious part of the whole circumstances. These people are saying, we're not a group, we just all dress exactly alike and we all have the exact same haircut, but we're not in a group, and we all have the exact same diet and have very similar habits, but we're not in a group.
Which is kind of the same thing with TOPY, I guess. TOPY always sort of advertised itself as the anti-cult, whilst taking on cult-like trappings, which I found was oddly appealing. And I fell into that too. I wore the uniform to a certain extent, had the haircut, still have a psychic cross tattoo. So I thought it was just, it was presented as something, it was like playing around with the trappings of a cult. But not, obviously, we're all too intellectually sophisticated to ever get involved in a cult or think that we were in a cult. So yeah, it was a strange sort of juxtaposition between, it playing around with, flirting with the idea of being a cult and simultaneously not considering itself a cult. At least maybe from the top down they were, but from where I was at, that's the way that I saw it.
Well, one of the primary things that you can look for when you're trying to figure out if you're in a cult is a sense of segregation from society and a sense of the mythos that you are better than other people for being involved in this group.
A sort of in-group, out-group situation. Yeah,
absolutely. This idea that if you've taken on this path of knowledge and you've really adopted this as a lifestyle, that you are better than other people in some senses because of the level of piousness and devotion that you have to your desire for freedom will separate you from your family. That's another criteria for a cult, is losing your identity, your individual identity, and then becoming part of this group ideology or this group mindset. And again, it's because, those people are sheep and those people are asleep and they don't know what the fuck is going on. And if you know what's going on, then you're going to adopt these specific behaviors and you are going to separate yourself from the old you, which was flawed. But the way that you get there is by doing these very specific things. Like, that's the thing that's the rub, is that you are not whole on your own. You need the group, you need the instruction, you need the leadership in order to be on the path.
Yeah, I read that the Castaneda group required members to cut themselves off from the past and their families. So would you describe your experience like that?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Because the rebirthing process is you're given a new name. The idea is that you're redreaming yourself. So
Yes,
anyone
the sort
who,
of fantastical reality that's painted on
right,
top of the one, and a
right,
break from it.
right. Right.
Yeah.
So it's and that's what makes it different from the Matrix in that what they are saying, what the Castaneda group was saying is the Matrix that everyone is living in, that's the hell realm. The Groundhog Day existence that everyone finds themselves in, that's the hell realm. The real dream is a dream of awareness and sentience in this other reality. And the only way to get into that reality is through Castaneda's energy, because he is the Nawal. So he is the one who basically holds the key to this sacred knowledge that's thousands of years old. Oh, but wait, there's no group to join. So you can't really be a part of it, even though these people have devoted their lives to this ideology and this mythos. But they're not a part of it either. But so you can't be a part of it, but we're all joining, we're all making this leap into this higher level of consciousness, but you can't, there's no way you're ever going to make it. So basically that's another aspect of the cult, is it's untenable. So no matter what you do, you're never going to be good enough. You could never eat sugar again, be on the perfect diet, recapitulate your life, do all the movements, learn all the movements that have ever been taught, focus on inner silence, dreaming, do all of these things monastically, and it's still never going to be enough because your leader has already gone. He's already left the building. And this is when he was still alive.
Yeah. Yeah, he was alive into the 90s.
The late 90s, yes.
Yeah. I thought Chris had something to add there for a second. Do you remember what it was?
It came and then it went. That's how my brain works.
As it
It's
goes.
like a hump. It's like a birdhouse with two holes, and hummingbirds just fly through it. And unless I plug one hole up, then the thought gets lost. So,
Right. I think both groups had the allure of a leader that was very intelligent, charismatic, and artistic. And I think that's kind of what brings them together is the art. You have a musician in Genesis P. Outrage, and you have a writer in Carlos Castaneda, whose books were, made him very wealthy. And I guess at first he was saying that they were nonfiction, but it, sort of surfaced that they were fictional. But I think the connection between art and people who are seeking, right, and they're intelligent, I think that's part of the draw. Do you think that's why, the narrative may have been kind of so convincing because these people were so dedicated to their art and their project, and they seem to kind of have it together in a way? Does this make sense?
yeah. I think the case with TOPY is I desired at that point in my life community, like artistic community, magical community. I was just starting to get into, well, I shouldn't say I was just starting to get into the occult. I started doing that when I was in junior high. But I liked what Genesis was saying about a culture. So he was taking all these hidden practices and things that were usually relegated to secret societies and kind of just making them public, sort of like street magic. So it was very appealing because it was non-pretentious and something very practical, and you could use anything, a Walkman or any sort of gadget as a talisman or some kind of a magical item to do whatever it is that you wanted to do. And then he was really obviously into sigil magic, which is the main practice of TOPY. So yeah, it was very appealing in that sense too. And I thought that he did have his shit together because on the outside, well, he had this organization of people and they all seemed very creative. And prolific. Psychic TV was putting out a live album every month for like 23 months in a row. So it was like, I want to be around this community, or I want to be a part, even if it's across the sea, a part of this group of people who actually are doing something to better themselves, or to try and improve themselves or improve their circumstances. But it wasn't until, within the last 6 years that I found out that Genesis, through his ex-wife, was a fucking megalomaniac. I mean, he was an abusive person, and it kind of made a lot of things that I kind of just tilted my head about back then. It kind of made it all make sense, because there always seemed to be some very intensely sort of dark aspect of Genesis, and of TOPY for that matter. But I was kind of drawn to that at that age, because it was rebellious. It was edgy.
Right. Of course.
Yeah. So
it's so funny, because I have such the antithetical experience, Natalie, in my world. I didn't want to be a part of anything. I approached this system of belief because I didn't want to be a part. I saw through the veneer of groups and groupthink and group mind, and I saw it all as a costume. So I saw the punk rock movement as a costume. I saw the goth movement as a costume. And for me, all of that, it certainly was fun, but it was really about wallowing in self-indulgence and a sense of nihilism and a lack of wonder of the world, and the sense of kind of like being, too cool for school.
Like premature cynicism.
And and I saw through all of that. And at a very, I think the reason I was so primed and so perfect for a cult was because I had grown up in this very transient childhood. So I was always the new kid. I was always the kid who was joining or going into social dynamics that had already been established. So I kind of knew the pecking order when I would go into a school. I could kind of tell who was cool, who's not cool, who's the in, who's the out. And so I think that kind of sophistication from childhood made going into a cult very appealing to me, because it was about isolating myself. And I was already someone very isolated. So anything that was a system that was, the onus was completely on me and not on a group, was what I wanted to be a part of, because I was a very physically active person, and I didn't want the intellectual, let's all get high and talk about the universe bullshit. I saw through that. What I wanted was action. I wanted to go into the desert and have mystical experiences. And I wanted to push my body to its physical limits through fasting and diet and doing movements and taking hallucinogenics and doing these things that were all very kind of self-focused. So when the system appeared to me, it was like, oh, okay, so this is what I have to do, is write my dreams down. This is something I already do, and try to gain awareness in my sleep. This is something that I already do. I was very drawn to that because I wasn't interested in other people's mystical experiences. I wanted to have my own. And I had more of an interest in pushing my physical body and my energy to its absolute maximum limit that I could. So I think that's something that the Castaneda world really opened up, was the dreaming world. And it was about having those dreaming experiences and then being able to verify the experiences that I'd had in my waking life. That's what really fascinated me. And so I took on that experience as though I was walking in, like I was a walking science project. And I just was using my body as the vessel. So that's what appealed to me, was when I would go into these seminars and there's 400 people doing movements and listening to these lectures, I was like, oh, they're hypnotizing people. I see what's happening here. There's forms of deprivation that are happening here that are giving people these experiences that they're calling magical experiences, but it's physiological what's going on more than it is from like a psychic realm. So I think that's the thing that I walked in skeptical. And when I saw these kind of moony-eyed people, I was like, what the fuck is, like, what is this? Like, why are all these people cutting their hair all of a sudden and wearing these very kind of uniform clothes? So it was easy for me to see through what felt culty and separate that from what my actual my own magical experiences that I was having were.
I think that the difference between your situation and my situation is that I never had a huge group of people and seminars and shit like that to go to. This was like a cult. If I still don't know I guess it was a cult.
I never know which word to use.
yeah. But I mean, that's the closest approximation. We can go with that for now. Of single people, I didn't have anybody anywhere remotely near me who, well, maybe Brett, but who was onto this stuff, Yeah. So it was like a mail order magical group / cult. So I never felt those same kinds of things. It was sort of cool to wear this uniform and to wear shirts with psychic crosses on them and have my head shaved except the long piece in the back braided into 23 different braids, because I was the only person doing it in my town. Like if there was 35 of us, then it might have been different and it might have felt more culty, but it just felt like I was connecting with people around the world in a way that was sort of removed and safe, I guess, in a way. So I never felt like, it was just different, just a different context than what you had to go through, Hunter.
Yeah.
So you guys both talk about sort of the magical experience of, I think another parallel between them is the magic aspect. And that it's interesting that both groups were seeking enlightenment through different forms of magic. I guess we already really covered that was sort of part of the draw for Hunter and yourself. Were there some form of ritual that you guys would perform to become? Probably not with TOPY, just sort of.
Are you kidding me? Of course.
I don't know.
Yeah. 23rd hour of the 23rd of every month is when everybody would do their sigil ritual and then send it into TOPY headquarters. Yeah. So you would have to, get out your candles and your blade and your whatever else your recording that you made, everything that you wanted to involve in your ritual. And it was sort of like a group intent, even though we were all in different time zones, obviously. But you knew that other people in various parts of the world were doing that same thing relatively sooner or later than you were. So yeah, it was very ritualistic in a sense, and but that was really the only group sort of hoop that people had to jump through. I never went to any of the campouts or anything like that, but that's when the initiations happened that I never had a part of, and I'm very glad that I didn't, because they sounded very intense, and a few of them went south, to my knowledge. Ritual?
I think that what makes humans so interesting is how easily we will seek that stuff out and adopt things, and kind of fill in our own blanks. So, there were people who truly treated Castaneda's books as though they were a religion. And, they would go into these seminars because he, for many years, for decades, he was giving talks at like the Phoenix bookstore in California, and, completely for free. And, they would get a packed house, but he wasn't really monetizing his magic at that point, other than writing these novels and then putting them out for the public. So, any primer people had, any magic primer was something that they basically got from the book or a book, and then they would just try to reproduce or recreate what had happened in the book. And I always found that very interesting, because I think what drew me to the Castaneda world, as I said initially, was my desire for freedom. And so I wasn't really looking for dogma or indoctrination. I wasn't trying to find someone to tell me that I was bad and that this is what I needed to do to be good and to be saved. So what I did, and maybe this was my child's mind and kind of my naivete going into this experience, was I just did things on my own as experiments, and then I just kind of mapped the behavior or what I would note. So I did, 30 days of fasting. I would do sleep deprivation. I would do, I would go on these insane psilocybin and MDMA trips. And none of this stuff was mandated. None of this was part of the curriculum. But these were things that I felt were specific to me, and they were pushing my physical body to the degree that I felt it necessary to push it. And so, I think that any kind of ritual behavior were things that people were bringing to the table. They certainly weren't things that were scripted. And I think that's a really important thing to understand, is that, who was the leader? Who was really leading any of these groups? Was there someone that you kind of felt was your North Star, or were you just kind of going along with what the program was and just assuming that the person you saw on the stage was the person leading the group, as it were? For me, I think I was very skeptical of any kind of ritual behavior that I felt like other people were bringing to the table. I felt like what my journey was very specific to me. And so I think that's where I am a chronically defiant person, is that I don't find it easy to follow the rules or instructions. I'm too defiant. I want to know why. Well, why am I supposed to do this? Not just do this and then tell me what happens. So, I think that's one of the things that they found appealing about me, was that I was kind of on my own and I was kind of doing my own thing. But I think that's also what makes someone like me dangerous, is that I'm not someone that's easily controlled. And so I'm not someone who it's going to be like, if they would have come to me and said, you have to give us all of your jewelry and sign over all of your wealth to us, I would have been like, how is this helping my freedom? Like, how is this helping me? Where some people did that very willingly, and gave away animals and gave away things, cut off relationships that were very important to them. So that's my short, long answer.
Yeah, I mean, I think I think humans, like you said, are drawn to ritual. And I think we see this very clearly through what, I guess is the cult of COVID, the never ending. I mean,
God.
I don't know if is it still going on where you guys live so here, let me just tell you, we had the shortest restaurant sort of thing ever for like 1 month. They were requiring people to show their papers, and then they
Oh, wow.
dropped it for 1 month this year at the beginning of the year. I was bummed out, and sometimes I think they change the rules all the time to like emotionally mess with you.
Yeah.
Because the rules are always constantly changing with the cult of COVID. And so the
Absolutely.
mandates are basically gone, as far as restaurants and I think some public places. There's a cool venue in Philly called The Fire, that, just she's this cool older lady that did not care and kept it going throughout the whole thing. So there have been people that have resisted it. So yeah, I wanted to catch up with like, we don't have to wear masks here anymore, okay? But people are still doing it. However, our public transit keeps changing the message. It's like, it's required one day and then the next day it's not. But most people seem to have voted and aren't doing it. It's very strange. I went to a party where only one person was doing it.
Wow.
At a barbecue outside, and I was like, "What are you doing?
Jeez
Like, what's
Louise.
the ritual is still there. This is what we do, I guess now." So, is the cult of COVID still going strong out where you guys are?
Well, I mean, we're not totally intertwined in the social life of Lawrence, Kansas, but I've heard tell that, well, first of all, there are still people that are wearing masks. Lawrence is a sort of woker than thou sort of place, loves to wear its virtual signaling on its sleeve. So there's that. And so there are places that are still, I think there's a few places down on Mass Street that are still requiring masks, right? Wonder
Yeah,
Fair,
probably.
probably. Yeah, the really woke ones. The same ones that had the Black Lives Matter and rainbow stuff all over the place.
Yeah, it's all the same
But
people. It's
yeah,
all the
it
same
is.
people,
Yeah,
and
the
it was
former rebels.
very frustrating. Yeah.
It is. But I've heard of this. There's been a lot of couples that sort of was in my vague social group at one point that have parted ways because of the vaccine, and they have kids. So one side will be pro, one side will be not. And so I've heard that it's really divided a lot of folks up, which I'm sure that's the case everywhere. But what is your take on the temperature here?
Well, I mean, I just think it's another form of control that people are really interested in adopting. I think the correlation you could create with this and a cult is that it's about how people perceive you more than it is the good that it's really doing.
Yeah.
So, these guys or these women who were shaving their heads to support Charles Manson, they were doing that not because hair somehow held them back energetically. It was to appear unified
Solidarity.
with someone. Yeah. And it was to divide themselves from the others in the world. And I think the COVID thing is the exact same thing, is that someone who's still wearing a mask over 2 years into this is not wearing a mask because they're genuinely afraid of a germ. They're wearing it because of a habituation of fitting into a group and what that group represents, which is I care more about you than you care about me. So it's this form of virtue signaling that I think is still going on. And the cult mentality is zero critical thinking. Zero. There's no thought whatsoever of science and of germs and how viruses are transmitted. None of that matters. What matters is what you appear, the message that you are appearing to give the world. And it's gone beyond the point of it actually even making sense anymore. And I don't think these people give a fuck. They're not trying to make sense. It's more, I'm holier than thou. And this is my martyred way of showing the world that.
Fundamentalist wokeism. It's the same dynamic when white liberals stand up for oppressed classes or peoples of any kind. A lot of those peoples don't want anybody's help. They don't want to be belittled or classified into arbitrary groups of skin color or sexual preference or anything like that. So it's so presumptive for those people to think that they're doing somebody a favor by, putting a sign in the yard or wearing a flag or whatever. So I think it's just the same thing. It's stating what side you're on, as if there's fucking sides, Right?
Yeah, I mean, I guess sort of I don't even like the pro-reality term, but yeah, just this sort of, I like to analyze the evidence, look at everything that's in front of me. So I can see why maybe Castaneda would appeal to you, Hunter, if that was kind of the way that you approached it, as sort of, you're experimenting and you're taking in data and you're learning things from the data. But yeah, all of that sort of like, you're right, it doesn't matter to these people. It's totally flown out the window, any kind of critical thought about it. And yeah, it is. So here, the neighborhood and the people that I see doing it the most are like in West Philly. And West Philly is like the sort of like hippie. Now it's more, yeah, but it's all those same kinds of people. And we did have big protests here. And I just thought it was so ironic because I was like, wow, but the policies that they're creating are actually taking away your rights and no one's in the street doing anything about it. Mm-hmm. And it was just a level of disappointment. I'm sorry.
You're talking about BLM protests, or are you talking about... Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, during 2020. Mm-hmm. I mean, the city has basically cleaned up since. It's almost like it never happened, which is interesting. But for a year and a half there, it was really spooky because no one came out. And then everyone was out in the street for those protests.
Which were all right. Nobody catches COVID when they're against racism.
Right. And they were rioting. I mean, I think it was really an excuse. You saw some of the recordings, they were just partying. I think people just wanted an excuse to go outside. Yeah. Even though I never let it stop me. I walked around 30th Street Station. It was empty. It was so spooky. It was like a post-apocalyptic film for a couple of weeks, which I thought was wild.
Just people standing around vaping, waiting for the next shipment of bricks to be sent in.
Yeah, I didn't go out for those, but the National Guard was very close to where I live. And that's the other thing, the sort of push and pull between like authority, but they're still being authoritative, right? With the like, wear this thing and... oh, I can't believe you better quarantine, or like, I still have to take a test at my place of work every week. I resisted it for 2 years.
The swab up the nose?
The news guy. Yeah.
Jeez, that's humiliating.
It is. And I was actually kind of grumpy yesterday when it happened, but it is what it is for now, and we'll see, what happens in the future with my personal life. But it is totally humiliating, and it is a ritual. And so, actually, back to sort of the funding of all of this, it's crazy how much money this must cost the federal government that we're paying, because the group that comes in is subsidized by, our tax dollars. And they have all this. I'm like, do you really need like all this stuff to swab my nose? Like, I understand some gloves and like maybe a mask or something, whatever. But like, they're wearing like full suits. Not like, I
Like
don't know what
hazmat
they are,
suits?
but they're not they're like scrubs, sort of. It's
Hazmat
like a
light.
blue thing. Yeah, it's hazmat light, like a face
Hazmat
shield.
bikini.
I
And it's
just
so,
think of all the money going into it.
yeah, exactly. And these are PCR, right?
Yeah.
Which
So
is
they're
the,
not even,
exactly, they're bullshit, total bullshit.
yeah.
Yeah, that's the ridiculous part. I mean, that it all starts with the test, which then
It did.
supposedly inform the case numbers, which supposedly inform all the fear we're supposed to be experiencing. Like the root of that, the PCR, is so faulty, so absolutely
Yes.
faulty. And it's been pointed out several times, but people don't seem to make that connection, that test is not going to tell you anything worthwhile.
Again, it's part of the ritual, part of the belief
Yeah,
that this thing is doing something, when really it's just creating people, being home for days that they might not need to be if they're not actually sick. If there were no tests, there would be no COVID.
exactly.
Like almost like virtually, because yeah. Anyway, so
How
it
many,
is.
how
Yeah,
many
go ahead.
Amish are dying? Yeah, exactly.
No, and actually they have some really nice events that like were happening, and that was actually a refuge. I'd go out to Amish country
Oh,
during
cool.
2020, and they were like still operating their businesses. So yeah, they're great. Their their kids sometimes don't wear shoes, but
That's what keeps their immune system so up and at 'em.
they're all playing in the dirt. Yeah.
Yeah, no sanitizer, like just dirt and God. That's all. That's all they need.
Livestock and
Yes.
cheese.
Manure in the air and good furniture. Quality furniture.
And quilts.
Yes.
Actually, cycling back really quickly to Castaneda, I found it interesting that it influenced people like George Lucas and Deepak Chopra. Do either of you have an opinion on those two sort of famous people?
Wait, who was the first one? George Lucas.
George Lucas,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, Lucas was very influenced by Joseph Campbell, and he really, I mean, he even stayed at Skywalker Ranch at some point, kind of at the end part of his life. Like he was very, very connected with Joseph Campbell. I think the thing with Castaneda is that the government is has so many different tentacles and so many different parts of our world, and the academic world is probably the most direct link culturally, if you want to look at movements that happen. They usually happen through academia. And because the government uses academia, I think a lot of these movements are really designed as experiments to see how people will adopt certain behaviors, and if they will adopt certain behaviors. And so, using Castaneda as an anthropologist and, creating this mythos around him, that he's found this wizened old Indian, and of course the knowledge that a wizened old Indian is going to be more important and is going to carry more weight than if it was some, nerdy, menschy white dude in a lab. So I think that you can basically write any story you want and put it in the context of a professor, or put it in the context of a doctor in education, and it's going to carry a lot more credence for people than if you just put it out in a film. And so I think that that's where the government used Castaneda, and people like Timothy Leary, and people like Terence McKenna, and people like Ken Kesey, is they basically took these men, these humans, and said, okay, let's start a revolution in the academic world, and then sit back and watch and see how that influences and affects the culture. And I think you can see Castaneda's influence in films. You can read it in literature. You can see it just in the overall zeitgeist and how the relationship we have with psychedelics. I think a lot of those things are birthed from Carlos Castaneda's his handling of those subject matters. So it doesn't surprise me that someone like Deepak Chopra would be influenced or into Carlos Castaneda. I know that James Redfield, the man who wrote The Celestine Prophecy, he cited Castaneda as a major influence, and The Celestine Prophecy has been debunked, as has A Course in Miracles. So again, there are these waves of movements that have happened in our culture that you can dial back, and you could say, oh, it was from this professor or from this doctor in the academic world. But the seed of that is some governmental agency that has influenced and infiltrated psychological departments in universities, or sociological department or anthropology departments in universities. These systems have been infiltrated, and the result is someone like a Deepak Chopra being considered an authority when the guy's basically a snake oil salesman. I mean, there, I said it.
Oh my God. The witches are going to come after you. Yeah, the question. Oh, I don't have anything to say about George Lucas and Deepak Chopra. I don't know anything about Deepak Chopra. I know the last time that we watched the Star Wars movies with the kids, I just realized that I'd never want to see them again in my life. So I graduated Star Wars. But yes, I guess he was...
Same. Yeah.
He was associated with Joseph Kimmel. So, and he was a Waldorf. He put his kids through Waldorf school, right?
Yeah.
And didn't let them near screens and devices and stuff like that. So there's some smarts there. I think he just wanted to make commercials for toys for kids, really. So he made them 2.5 hours long. Any old way. It would be interesting to see if there's some kind of, like you were talking about with these cults and stuff like that, behind TOPY, because TOPY would have been a perfect experiment in so many ways because of that, because they were flirting with cult-like notions. They would release, TOPY at one point released a picture disc numbered for the victims of the Jonestown Massacre. I don't remember how many that was necessarily.
800 or 900.
Something like that. So they put out whatever the body count. And the disc was actually a recording of various Jim Jones speeches. And then I think some of it, the last part of it, was the drinking of the Kool-Aid. So, hey.
At gunpoint. But my favorite fun fact about Jim
I'm not
Jones,
done.
total sidebar, Natalie. My favorite fun fact is that Jim Jones was a door-to-door monkey salesman in Gary, Indiana. That was his very first job when he was 16. Door-to-door monkey sales.
My goodness.
Fun fact.
How does one even get into that?
In Gary, Indiana.
They've got a monkey shortage in Gary, Indiana. So that was a right market.
My goodness.
So also, I was just going to say before the sidebar, is that they were also very fascinated by the Manson family. So,
Yes.
and serial murderers and stuff like that, which at that point in my life were things that I found fascinating too. Not because I thought these people were cool or I wanted to emulate them or anything like that, but I was fascinated by the dark side of humanity, of the human mind, of human potential, because I didn't feel dark at all. So I was fascinated by why anybody would do stuff like that. But I think a lot of people were fascinated by dark things because they were dark, because they related to that darkness. And I found a lot of that out as the years went on, hearing about ex-TOPY people who OD'd. Many of them OD'd on heroin. Many of them, went into deep depressions. And so I think, I wouldn't say that TOPY was about enlightenment. I think maybe it was about self-exploration, but that doesn't always end well. Sometimes you look inside and you don't see pretty things, and if you don't know what to do about them, then you're just stuck with an open wound, not knowing what to do with it. So I think there were probably a lot of casualties, metaphorically and literally, from this movement that I'm not sure whether any of that's ever been addressed. I don't know a lot of these people anymore. I thought about interviewing Tom Banger, who was the head of the U.S. station of TOPY, just to get his take on it. But he, until right up until Genesis died, seemed to be good buddies with him and thought he was a great guy and stuff like that. And I'm not convinced. So there's that. It's my 2 cents. I don't know if that even answered any question or whether there was a question, but
She was asking about
George Lucas and Deepak Chopra.
It's
Yes.
okay if you have no opinion on either of them.
Not really.
I don't have much of one. I don't think I'd know who Deepak Chopra was if it weren't for Sam Harris, who I used to listen to just fall asleep, actually.
Yeah.
I didn't really listen to Sam Harris. He just has that voice.
Yeah. Very calming.
But yeah, I had never heard of him before then. But yeah, he seems kind of silly at best to me.
I'm just curious, what was Sam saying about Deepak Chopra?
I think they're in a feud.
Sam's always in a feud with somebody.
Because Deepak Chopra might believe in some kind of higher power. And
Oh my gosh.
right, Sam Harris is like some kind of staunch atheist, which is another sort of, I think, faith-based situation.
It is.
Yeah, especially on the internet. I find these sort of internet groups to be very fascinating, because it is very decentralized. It's maybe maybe Castaneda is sort of a proto of that, a bit, where, you have all these groups of people who coalesce on the internet surrounding, let's say, one topic or one idea. I think it's a really interesting time to live in with all these people, because also we have no idea what people are consuming in their private time. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you're just walking amongst these people that are, I think, maybe floating in a lot of different realities.
Oh, yeah.
Which is the case anyway, right?
Yeah.
But still, anyway.
I think the COVID situation we were talking about earlier is a perfect example. An outstanding example of what worlds people live in, because I think we found out. I always knew that people, work their 40-hour-a-week jobs and come home and channel surf until they fall asleep on the recliner, and then they do it all do the same thing the next day. So they kind of are already suckling the teat of mainstream media. But this really showed to what extent, because all this stuff, I mean, everything that you get through the tube is hearsay for the most part. You just either believe it or you don't believe it. And you got to see how many people not only believed it, but were willing to have that be their hill that they die on, or shame people in public, or really ostracize members of their family because they didn't believe the same things that they heard through their fucking TV and didn't have any firsthand experience with. So that was a perfect example of how media is so utterly pervasive and how porous of a container it is for any actual tangible reality, and that people were so easily taken by that. That's a narrative, that's a pretty strong narrative that I think I would want to start poking at and seeing where the holes are. But it seemed like nobody thought of that. Like they're just gonna, oh, really? Oh my God! And then they will just goose step off the cliff, and if that's what they're told to do. It's just very odd, very strange. That's my
Yeah. I think there was one more I had here. Yeah, I guess I see the connection of art and cults undeniable. So back to fantasy. We're living through this break of reality. And there are all sorts of different realities that people are living through. But do you feel like maybe there's a silent majority of people that isn't really into the whole thing, and that a lot of I think the reason they do it at work, my personal work, is I work for a federally funded nonprofit, and I think that's why a lot of these people, again, it's sort of like dependency. Our whole culture is dependent on this system to give it money, to give it, resources, etc. I'm not even sure there's a question here. But
But is there a silent majority?
yeah, like do you think this is gonna, I mean, they also, I saw like the sort of COVID Ukraine war shuffle, right?
I like the meme, like it's Ukraine season already. I still have my COVID decorations up. I think that kind of sums
Right.
it up.
Right. Right. So just totally connected to the mainstream media, and um I personally can't understand it, but I mean, we have the internet. I don't know why you would need to watch CNN or
Well,
any of that stuff.
that's true. That's true. Because I think another thing that sort of sealed the deal as far as media is concerned is because of the Trump fake news declaration. Him saying that CNN and all these networks were fake news, and of course, all the liberals thought that it's just because they were bad mouthing him, but it really was because they were fake news. But because it came out of Trump's mouth, it was automatic hogwash, and they went to the opposite end of that, of what he was saying, the opposite extreme. So they just sort of solidified that and went, no, I'm going to believe everything the media says. So I think
I
that
guess it
kind of
was
set
those
the
people that
stage.
were like crying when Hillary didn't get
Yeah.
elected. The
Oh my
same
God.
silly people. That footage I can never get over. I'm like, wow,
Uh-huh.
how, why? Just how and why? I don't
Yeah,
know how
exactly.
you're
Like,
so invested in something like that.
does the person you just need someone with breasts in the office? Because, I mean, there's nothing else going on for her. She's just, if you want a female in office, like, let's have a
Oh, it
good
makes me
one.
sad. It makes me sad, the state of women in our mainstream political apparatus, or whatever you want to call it. Like, none of them. It's very strange time, and especially for women, I think. This is totally off topic and doesn't have to make it in, but yeah, like the Depp Heard situation, I'm just like, Oh no. Like I don't know. It's
Have you followed that at all?
What is
The
it?
Johnny Depp
Oh
Amber.
God. Oh my God.
I don't. I had a
It's
feeling that you
so
did,
it's
though.
so classic bait and switch. It's so on brand for the lack of discernment and the immediate gratification. It's like scraping the bottom of a lake and just getting the sludge and the shit and all the stuff that the catfish eats and serving that up as though it's cuisine. It's just so, I mean, talk about two deeply damaged, narcissistic megalomaniacs. And that perfectly encapsulates what our culture is the fact we give a fuck with what these two people are doing in their private lives.
right.
And what I find so interesting is that, you know, in the beginning of the Castaneda world, there was very little internet. There was very little cell phone usage. He hated the cell phone. He didn't like the internet. He was not into the virtual world. That was not
Right.
his thing at all. And not really into the whole hippie movement, the peace, love, and let's smoke a joint. That wasn't his scene at all. And it seems like people who live in that reality, kind of the left woke reality, they have completely degraded any democratic ideology they may have had. I think that's the thing that's become so fascinating about all of this, is that all those people we're talking about, women, Democrats, the people on the left, they have become the arbiters of being offended and the makes me feel culture. And that's become our, like, the baseline for our reality is how something makes you feel.
Yeah.
Not what you think about it, but what you feel about it. And I think that's what's fucking us up, is that we're not really interested in facts anymore. It's all about our feelings and giving other people power and control over our feelings and over our state. And I think that's the thing that we keep seeing, is that it's one emotional manipulation after the other. So the
Right.
first one is COVID and you're going to kill grandma. Then it becomes the Ukraine. Then it becomes the trans identity movement. Then it becomes Black Lives Matter. So it's, you constantly have this carrot of being offended dangling in front of you, and it's for you to determine how offended you're going to be.
And it's
Right.
all
I
result.
call it outrage. Oh, sorry.
No. You call it outrage. What?
Outrage culture. Yeah.
Yeah,
Exactly.
absolutely. And all the end result of all of that is further division.
It's all ego. It's all ego. None of this is coming from rational thought, discernment, critical thinking skills, none of it. So critical thinking has vanished in the political sphere, in the socio-cultural sphere. None of that matters. What matters is what I feel in my gut. And I think that's what's fucked us up. And I think that's why we have disempowered ourselves as a culture, is because we're looking for the next thing. And what a perfect example, the Heard Depp case. Because here you have these two multimillionaires that are fighting each other, and in a very Jerry Springer way. And we can sit back in our, $20,000 a year lives and look at these wealthy people with such disgust and disdain and vitriol and hatred as though we have some kind of moral authority.
Or connection to them whatsoever.
Yeah.
Exactly. And really know what's going on.
Oh, yeah.
I saw something in tweets. I really don't know the first thing about this Depp Heard thing, but something in tweets like, well, this is really challenging the believe all women thing. So were you bringing up something having to do with that? Was she looking really bad in all of this, or?
Well, I watched the first few days of the trial because I was unemployed. I was in an unemployed limbo. I was getting all the clearances, etc., for what I'm doing, and so I was like, I don't have a lot to do right now. I guess I'll watch this for like a little while. And so I'd be like cleaning the house and like listening to it, and I do think Johnny Depp is a really scary person. I think he's kind of but he's also pathetic in a way where like a lot of this stuff, like he basically, was ruining his own career through his addictive behavior. Amber, I don't know if I trust her, but it does bum me out a little bit that he was victorious in this defamation lawsuit. Because when you look at the facts of the case, she didn't even mention his name in the original like Sun article. The Sun won over in the UK, so I really expected it to go a different way, just like from a legal standpoint, but it didn't. And so, maybe Amber's a dubious witness, but I think, I've been in relationships like that, and both parties are kind of like doing this. They're both needling each other and getting reactions, and it's really hard to say at one point, what's going on between those two people, especially from our standpoint. We're not in that relationship, so we have no idea, like you said. And why are we meant to care? But just like, I don't think it should have been televised at all.
Yeah.
So
the Ghislaine Maxwell trials, they should have been.
It's a giant fucking distraction.
Yep.
And what I have, where I've gone into my examination is the psychopathology of these two people. And I love what the defending psychologist said about Amber Heard, that she is definitely a cluster B, borderline personality narcissist, and that a lot of what I find so fascinating is we're talking about two sycophants. Talking about two people who are deeply, deeply damaged, who have very twisted pathologies, first of all, and probably deserve each other in many regards because they were using each other for different reasons, first and foremost. But I think it's interesting that as a country and as a culture, we're so devoid of any moral fiber that we give a fuck about these two people. That's the part that fascinates me. I don't care if she shit in his bed. I don't care if she slapped herself in the face and said, he hit me. I don't give a fuck. I really don't. But I think the fact that our country does and our world does give a fuck, even if one person's watching, I find that problematic because it says how low we've set the bar for what's considered newsworthy and what's considered televisable.
Right. Yeah, I don't know if trials should be televised.
She shit in his bed.
Why?
The UK
Because she was mad
court
at him.
said it was the dogs, but the turds were very large. So
Did your arms just do that? Very large.
I just maybe just not on purpose even,
Okay.
but yeah, like the maid said that they were very big
Yeah.
turds.
And you always in these circumstances, one of the therapist who did her analysis of Heard, I always kind of lean toward what the people who work for these people say. How
the assistant.
how do these people treat the people who work for them?
The help.
And neither one of these people is a decent, kind,
No.
generous person. They're both abusers. So again, I look at this and I say, okay, if we pull back 30,000 feet and we're kind of seeing this from above, what part of the anthill is this in? And it's in the distract pile. That's where
Right.
this goes. We've gotten everyone to this fever pitch with COVID. Now Ukraine. Now monkeypox. We've kept
monkeypox.
We've kept it at this fever pitch level. Now we need to pull the release valve and give some
Right.
entertainment for a moment and distraction for a moment before we go for this next wave of trauma, basically.
Right, again, yes, the reality on top of, the physical reality that you or I experience on a day-to-day basis, that comes from various sources, the media, the internet, etc. So, do you guys have any final thoughts? Or
Not that are coming off the
Chris
top of my
has
head.
never pooped in our bed. I will give him that.
great. I've never had that problem either.
Now, don't you
With
feel
any-
better? No, honestly, don't you feel better, Natalie? Don't you feel morally superior to Amber Heard because you've never shat in someone's bed? Can't you go to bed tonight and think, you know what? I got this life. I've never shit in anybody's bed. I got it going on.
I wouldn't put it past Johnny Depp and all that Aleister Crowley poop demon stuff, but
Was he into Aleister Crowley?
yeah, I'm almost certain. I mean, the whole thing with Depp and the West Memphis Three and
Oh, yeah,
getting
yeah, yeah.
Eccles out, and they just seem like they're into some dark stuff, you know. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's where I go first is
Okay.
Aleister Crowley for the dark stuff. I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah.
He's the king.
But I
He's
did
the-
make a joke, and he laughed. So that was the real goal of that.
Yeah, and he had a very, very sketchy relationship with Hunter S. Thompson
Yes.
as well, who was a known pedophile, and he had his own problematic personal history. So I'm not saying that Johnny Depp is without fault
Right.
at all.
Yeah.
You know, where the poop flies, where it may land. I don't know if that's a saying, but if it's not, it should be.
I think you heard it here first.
We could put it on a shirt or something.
Yes, exactly.
Free Depp.
Free Depp. And have like a pilot, have the poop emoji there.
Oh,
Yeah.
well, this has been totally delightful.
Likewise.
Thank you guys so much for sharing your time with me today.
Absolutely.
So I drank a whole glass of iced tea and generally have to use the bathroom for about an hour. It was nice to actually see you in the person.
In the virtual pixel flesh.
Version.
Well, thank
But
you
yeah,
for
we
having
didn't
us on.
do the video last time, so this was
Yeah.
been fun to And
It's
I'm trying
more-
to.
Yeah,
make
you
it
can
look
tell there's
cool.
a human behind the voice, so it's good.
Yeah.
It helps, I think. Yeah, it's a little less
Yeah.
abstract.
Yeah, you like the more organic, and I still have some weird Capricorn controlling situation or something, but I don't I don't
Yeah,
know.
I'm a little, I don't know, Virgo analyst. I don't, I don't
All right,
even
we
know what
better
that
go
means.
That
before we
got weird
stop.
really
Before we
quickly.
like just keep making like, butt jokes or
Exactly.
whatever.
Yes. Okay. Have a good evening, Natalie.
It was a pleasure
Good
to
night.
meet you.
Yeah.
You
Farewell.
too. Let's
Thank
speak
you.
again sometime. All right.
Yes,
Yes.
definitely.
All right. Take care. If you've liked what you've heard and would like to contribute to The Melt, there are a few ways that you can do that. The most tangible would be financially. Just click the Patreon link in the episode notes, and there you will find ways that you can contribute for as little as $3 a month. This will give you access to bonus episodes, early access to regular episodes, and you can also participate in monthly Zoom meetups. Contributing financially will also help make The Melt better, pay the bills, and help to make this podcast a full-time endeavor that I can fully devote my time to and provide you with more content. Another way of contributing would be to go to wherever it is that you subscribe to The Melt and give it a favorable review or rating, and this will help it to reach more people. You can also spread the word to friends and family via social media, email, or word of mouth. And lastly, if none of those options are readily available or appealing to you, simply send your positive thoughts and intentions. In an interconnected and quantumly entangled multiverse, these also go a long way. Thank you.